I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, which is actually a longer amendment than just the Garrett amendment. It's the Garrett, Himes, Andrew, Engel amendment. And in it, the FAA's New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia airspace redesign plan, which would redirect thousands of flights per year over the houses of many of my constituents, and actually the constituents of the other sponsors of the bill as well. Looking at this, we realize this has a very real and negative impact upon the region, including a potential for a decrease in home values. You see that new flight patterns, which would be considered here, over the region should not be implemented until a thorough study of alternatives is actually presented to Congress. Now, this amendment prohibits the FAA from continuing implementation of the airspace redesign until it has conducted a study on alternative designs. To do what end is that? To reduce delays at the 4 airports considered in the redesign. Finally, it is imperative that the FAA consider the concerns of the people that are and have been afflicted by this action. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this amendment.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman and my colleagues, have the greatest respect from the gentleman from New Jersey, and I understand his predicament. He has been one of the strongest advocates for his district, and some of the potential problems that might arise from airspace redesign. I've had the opportunity to travel to the gentleman's district and meet with his constituents who have raised great concerns about the New York airspace redesign. Now, this does put in place another study of the airspace redesign, and unfortunately it delays implementation of airspace redesign in the Northeast Corridor in that New York airspace until that's complete. So that's why I have to oppose this. Now, work with the gentleman in trying to make certain that FAA treats them fairly and that there are hearings. Now, we've had 120 hearings. I've been in every jurisdiction from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, all the way up into Connecticut, which is part of the New York airspace, in hearings and public meetings. There have been over 120 FAA meetings. This has been drugged through the courts, and finally there were suits, and they were all consolidated, and the issues again were resolved, and FAA should go forward with airspace redesign and address the concerns, continue to address the concerns of the gentleman. Why is this important to everyone here? Because more than 70% of the chronically delayed flights around the United States start in the New York airspace. That means when New York goes down, the whole country starts going down. Now, you got to understand that this battle's been going on for nearly 2 decades, and in and out of court and fights and everything for the redesign. So what we're left with is a corridor for airspace that is sort of like having US 1 going into New York City 20 or 30 years ago and not expanding or revising the capacity. So that's why we have this situation. That's why I strongly urge not the adoption of this, willing to work with the gentleman and try to, again, make certain that the concerns. We do have quieter aircraft, and when we started this debate, and I don't want him to or his constituents to suffer, or any of the others in the New York airspace. But this has to come to a conclusion. Again, it affects everyone in the House of Representatives, because more than 70% of our chronically delayed flights start in this area, and we have not been able to resolve this question. Reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes. I thank the gentleman, and I rise in strong support of his amendment. It's the Garrett, Himes, Andrews, Engel amendment. I rise today in strong support. This amendment will require the Federal Aviation Administration to study alternatives to the New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia airspace redesign. It will also prohibit the FAA from continuing with the implementation of the airspace redesign until the new study is submitted to Congress. I have to take issue with what my friend the chairman said before. We have not found that there were hearings for this. This has been trying to they've been trying to jam this through and want less and less people to know about it. I forced them to come into my district, but until that happened, they didn't want any kind of input from the community. I've opposed this airspace design from day one and have fought its implementation every step of the way. Time and time again, the FAA has pursued the airspace redesign while ignoring the concerns of my constituents in Rockland County, New York. This plan, which will only save minutes on flight time, but it will disrupt the lives of thousands of residents in my district who live under the new flight paths. As my constituents have noted to me, the noise and air pollution in the area will increase. It's unknown how this increase in air pollution will affect the disproportionate rate of childhood asthma in my district. The modernization of our aviation system is necessary to bring it into the 21st century, to keep pace with the increased number of flights, and to also maintain our technological advancements by implementing new equipment to keep our system the safest in the world. However, there are several alternatives to this plan, and I encourage my colleagues to support this amendment that would require the FAA to take them into consideration. We now learn that not only planes landing at Newark will fly over my constituents, but planes taking off from Kennedy as well. This is a double whammy. It's not fair. So I commend Mr. Garrett. I support this amendment, and I will continue to oppose the FAA reauthorization until the FAA halts and revises the airspace design and reports to Congress. After all, we're the ones that report to the people. They should report to us. The FAA should report to us. I yield back.
I thank my good friend from New Jersey for yielding. And, Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the amendment that is the desk. This amendment addresses the FAA's redesign of the airspace over New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia with noble motives to actually improve our air travel. But the fact of the matter is that the redesign was badly implemented from the start and used flawed procedures. Plans for this redesign have moved forward without proper and appropriate input from stakeholders and without regard to the parties who are most affected, notably many of our constituents. As planes have been rerouted to fly over southwestern Connecticut, upon descent into New York's airports, my constituents have begun experiencing unnecessary and unprecedented noise levels. A day does not go by that I don't hear this concern from my constituents. I've joined with my colleagues in a bipartisan effort to call upon the FAA to simply study alternatives. We know that there are good alternatives. This should be done prudently and carefully. Families who move to my district to find a quiet refuge are now faced with the prospect of daily disturbances. Alternatives must be considered before any more action is taken. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Well, again, how much time do I have, may I ask?
The gentleman has 2 minutes.
Well, again, I have to say that I have the greatest respect for the gentleman, Mr. Garrett, the gentleman from New Jersey, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, and the gentleman from New York. And they all do have interests here, and they're trying to protect them, and they're concerned about noise with the change of the New York airspace redesign. But again, this has been going on for 2 decades. We have a very narrow corridor. We do need to redesign it. We have safety questions now. We have the delays, chronic delays. 70% of them emanate from the New York. They start in this New York airspace, then they ripple across the country. So 70% of the members are impacted by this particular provision. I appreciate their concern in asking for additional study, but what they do is, in the provisions they've offered, is delay implementation. We've just finished numerous court cases which were consolidated, which ruled against those in question, and I know it's difficult, but we've got to get this done. And again, I so much appreciate their looking out for their constituents, stating their concern and expressing in every way possible. I will continue to work with them and make certain that there is fairness to the implementation, and whatever they adopt does not disturb or unduly cause distress for their constituents. And that's all I can do, but I do have to oppose this amendment in the interests of the committee, the country, and the other members.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from New Jersey.
And just to conclude then, Mr. Speaker, the FAA's airspace redesign plan has not been responsive, as we've heard from the floor, to the concerns of our constituents, and it's not been comprehensive. Secondly, redesigning the airspace would have little effect on delays while alternatives are considered. Finally, I ask the consideration of this bipartisan support to conduct a study on alternative designs. And with that, I encourage support for this amendment, and I yield back.